Hello and welcome to Politalks on RPTV. Today I'm your host Trayvon and we're here with special guest Pam McConnell. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So what is it that made you want to run for City Council?
Well, I had been a school board trustee. I had a whole history of working in the community, developing housing cooperatives. And when Barbara Hall left, she basically said to me, "Are you ready to take on this responsibility?" I was really very happy to represent this community, both the Regent Park community and the larger community, and I've been doing so for many terms now. So I was happy when the term came to an end and I had to make a decision. Shall I ask the voters once again to select me as their representative? And I came to the conclusion that I have a lot of work still to do.
How did you end up becoming so involved in the Regent Park community?
First of all, I had children that went to Spruce Court School, and so they met a lot of Regent Park kids in their day-to-day activity. Also, I was involved very much in building housing cooperatives, so Oak Street Co-op was one of the co-ops that I helped develop. But then I began, as a trustee, to get to know people in the Parks and Recreation, people here at Focus, began to look at the moms and the dads and the families. So it really all started with getting to know the kids, and then finally moving into a situation where I had a chance to redesign a whole community based on the ideas of the people who lived here. And that's perhaps been the most exciting and most fulfilling part of my work as a councillor. But it all begins really with bringing people together and listening to their ideas. So making sure there's enough childcare, making sure that we have the right parks, that we keep them up to standards. That when we're rebuilding a community like this, that we're putting in all of the spaces where people will begin to meet each other. I think fundamentally making affordable housing for our community so that people of all economic experiences can live together. That's what small towns are about. And I think that for a city, what we need to do is we need to put those small towns together. And then we need to connect them by something called transit. And that when we begin to think about it in those localized ways, we have a much better vision for Toronto and where it sits in the world market and as a world city.
Do you think the revitalization has affected the community positively?
Well, I think that people are seeing their people moving into. People are seeing people moving into brand new places, and so they're visiting those people, and they're saying, "Yeah, this is real, and I'm going to have one of these at some point." I think having the big park, Regent Park, opened, and it being beside the aquatic center, it brings people across Gerrard and across Shooter, but it also brings people across Dundas. And you'll remember that in our old Regent Park, people didn't cross Dundas very often. It was north and it was south. So I think that people are not just seeing that it's nicer buildings, clean and wonderful, which they are, but they're also seeing that their building is just as nicely designed as the building next door that is being sold. And more importantly, that both of those families can send their children to the daycare on Oak Street, or they can go to the new Nelson Mandela School, which is connected to the community center. I think people are beginning to see this as really building a whole village rather than an individual spot. And I think it's giving people real hope where I think in the past was despair. I think often people felt in Regent Park that they were left out of the discussion, and I hope that now they feel that they're in the discussion.
How do you think the revitalization affects students?
The most important thing about young people is that they have their friends and they have their school. And so I don't want to disrupt that. And at the same time, we have this problem of not yet being, maybe in about a year, we'll be at a point where we can say to somebody, you know, in March we're going to demolish your house, but in April you're going to be moving across the road to your new house. That's what we want to move towards, so that children in elementary school are continuing to go to the same familiar school with the same familiar teachers, but most importantly that young adults, teenagers, are going easily to the schools that they went to, and they're able to keep their friendships together. And if I could say that that's one of the important parts about the organization like Focus, because what it does is it focuses on making sure that our young people's voices are heard, and that we are not leaving any of those kids behind, and we are not sending them to the outer wilderness of somewhere where they are feeling at sea. There could be no worse thing in our revitalization than to lose one of our kids because of that.
How important do you feel the voice of youth is? Is it a powerful voice?
I think it's, by the way, a very powerful voice. I wonder that whether young people know how powerful they are. You know, we're building this legacy, but we're actually building it for you. So it's pretty important that you hear and you input what it is that you want, because I'm hoping that you and your family will stay here and will feel free to live out your life. So in the beginning, I say that we didn't hear enough from youth, and I think we learned from that. And now we're trying to engage them through some of our youth forums, through organizations like Focus, but also through one-on-one conversations. And we are trying to get our young people to understand what's being talked about at the monthly or every 6 week updates, and trying to get them connected to what their family is. There's nothing more powerful than the conversation that happens across the table in the family. And I think that really we want our families to be talking to young people and making sure that their voice is being heard inside all of these organizations. And my job is really to make sure that that's planned rather than just happens. And that's what we've been busy trying to do.
Besides Regent Park, what other projects are you involved in?
Really, I've modeled a lot of the discussions in the communities after Regent Park, although the first one was St. Jamestown, and we built a community center, but we didn't get a swimming pool. And so in the same way as we've got an aquatic center over the last year, we've been over the 5 or 10 years been putting money aside through development money, and now we've done the design and we're going to build the swimming pool that should have been there 10 years ago. We also, from the community in St. Lawrence, heard that they were interested in redoing the North Market. It's a terribly ugly-looking building. It was built in 1967, and it was supposed to be temporary. And so we looked for a user, and we found a city department that would be able to use it, and we've now done a worldwide call, and it's a wonderfully architecturally beautiful building. And that will be starting, and it'll be for the farmers. That will be starting in January, when we start to move the farmers into their temporary building. But it's a step-by-step project. And it's about $96 million that will be going into our community. I think the thing that people will be most surprised at is Union Station. They've dug down 3 stories now, and it's going to be an aha moment when people go in and look at that. And so I've been working on that, and the Jack Layton Ferry Dock Terminal, because as we've been developing all of these waterfront parks, which are in my area, we've also been trying to do some new ones. Finally, I think over the next term, we'll be looking at the first Parliament site. We have the land now. That was a big accomplishment. And now we have to look again at how to design it with the vision of the community, the heritage community.
There's been a lot of debate around the TTC. Where do you stand with that whole thing?
Well, I don't know that anybody should stand one place or another. I think that what we need rapid transit, we need affordable transit, and we need to get it done now. We should have been doing it 10 years ago when the provincial government pulled the money off that. So to me, we're building transit along Queen's Quay that is LRT. Well, LRT doesn't mean streetcars to me. On the other hand, we have streetcars here, so we need to improve them. We need to get the new ones going. So each area needs a different form, and there's been a lot lot of discussion about the downtown relief line. I like to say, no, not one line, lines. How do we manage to connect our people to their workplace and to their families in other parts of the city? The connectivity and getting it done is important. So I think that digging holes may not be the fastest way in some of the areas. Getting rapid transit off the roads and moving it quickly through, that can be done in about 7 years. I support that. But as a downtown councillor, I'm very concerned about everyone getting on the same subway and not being able to get our own people on. And you've probably had the same experience. You go to the Dundas streetcar, you go to the Carlton streetcar, and they all go whizzing by. Why? Because they're full. So it was really important in the last term to make sure that we had bigger streetcars. And now the question will be, and the challenge will be, to make sure they come regularly, so that we're not waiting and waiting and waiting, but that we're moving people quickly. If people are moving quickly, they'll take the transit. If they're moving slowly, they'll resort to the car. And we cannot have that on our roads.
Well, thank you so much for joining our show. It was a pleasure having you.
Well, it was a pleasure to meet you, and I'm delighted with the conversation, and I hope the conversation is ongoing. It's important for our youth to have a voice in building our city, and most importantly, building their neighborhood.
Thank you. That's about all the time we have for today's episode. Once again, our guest was Pam McConnell. You've been watching Politalks on RPTV. I'm your host, Trayvon, and we're signing out.